bring in Thomas O'Donnell, an energy and geopolitics strategist at globalbarrel.com. He's also a former visiting professor at the Central University of Venezuela, and he joins us from Berlin. Thank you so much for being here with us. So this seizure, a clear escalation here. The White House says more tanker seizures could be coming. If that happens, I mean, what would that do to the Venezuelan economy?
Well, there's two aspects here. Of course, if they can't export any oil for a long period of time, this would be very difficult for the regime. I think what we have here is a problem where Trump really wants to get Maduro out. He wants to scare him and squeeze him. He really doesn't want to commit troops or get involved inside the country. It could escalate, although the opposition tells him everything will go fine, don't worry, just decapitate the regime. So this is another pressure tactic. But, you know, the regime doesn't care about what the people eat. That's why there's 8 million refugees since Maduro's been there. So cutting off the oil is more pressure, but it still would take a very long time before the regime itself would be squeezed enough to in some way shake it.
Yeah, but this does represent a huge percentage of their income. I think is what was it? 90% of their foreign income comes from oil. I mean, it's a huge economic blow for the country, right?
No, I agree with you. But what this is something a fellow who had been fired by Chavez in 2000 told me. Look, everyone's arguing how much oil will PDVSA put out under Chavez, 2.5 million, 2 million. He said, it doesn't matter. If they get 500,000 for years, the regime can live, and who cares about the people? And that's what they have done. So they still have gold. They still have, you know, they don't care about the economy. There is no business class that's independent anymore of the state. Everything comes from the state to the people, unless the people rose up. And that is not a path that the opposition is willing to take. So Trump has a problem here, how to really force him out. I'm sure he's calling him up and threatening him and so forth. I agree. It makes it harder in the long run. After several months or a year or so, it'll make it harder for Maduro to, you know, pay people in the military and keep them loyal, pay the colectivos, the armed groups that are in the barrios and so forth that support the government. But it's yes, but there's a limit to it, is what I'm saying.
Right. Okay. So oil might not be the pressure point that the Trump administration thinks it might be. Still, though, critics say this is all about oil. It may not be about seizing oil, seizing oil from Venezuela, but might be opportunities for the U.S. in terms of oil exploitation. So if there were regime change tomorrow, I mean, how realistic would it be that American oil companies could actually ramp up production in any meaningful way?
Well, first, let me make it clear. For 20 years, Chavez and Maduro have said they're going to come for our oil. They said it's the last Coca-Cola in the desert, but it's not anymore. We have shale. So there was no reason that the United States was going to risk what they would have to risk to go into Venezuela, which would be the biggest intervention. I mean, they have the biggest military and capability. It's not a lot, but they have the most of any country they've ever invaded in Latin America. So yes, I think what's one thing that has changed here, there are other things, but finally the United States administration, or the United States in general, has some interest in the oil for the first time in 20 years of Chavismo. And there's more than one thing here. The United States right now has a major campaign together with the Ukrainians, aside from all the negotiations with the Russians we hear about. They're squeezing the Russian oil exports. They're really squeezing it. The Ukrainians are hitting them with drones, with American military intelligence support, and there's really tough sanctions. Those barrels have to be replaced. So the administration thinks about, we better think longer term. Right now, there's a glut in the market. We can do these things, but there's not always going to be a glut in the market. We got to get Venezuela back online. And I think for the first time that this administration is thinking in those terms. Now, there's other things that have always been true. In the United States, we're getting this great amount of light oil, but the refineries around the Gulf Coast, where most of ours are in the United States, are for a heavier crude that historically came from Latin America and old stuff from Texas. So mixing in Venezuelan oil with that very light American crude makes the Western Hemisphere, and they also get Canadian heavier crude, mixing that in would, it's the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, right? Making the Western Hemisphere a fortress in and of itself, self-sufficient. And there is that logic. So for the first time, there are these logics where they might have an interest in going after the oil. I don't think they want to pay the price of making a mistake and going in and underestimating what needs to be done, like happened in Iraq.
We've been hearing...
That's their conundrum.
Yeah, absolutely, to say the least. I mean, we've been hearing from Venezuela's main opposition leader, who's generally supported this idea. I mean, what are Venezuelans saying about all of this right now?
Oh, I mean, I would say overwhelmingly, the vast majority of Venezuelans they don't care how Maduro goes. And in the first administration, remember Trump and Bolton gave this idea, oh, we might do regime change. Now, they had no intention of doing anything on the ground. But when there was interviews inside Venezuela by reputable, interviewers, it was something like 90% of the people said, whatever, just get rid of them, because people were starving, people are emigrating, right? Now, so there's that. Now, on the other hand, if you talk to military experts who go through the way the regime keeps itself in power, all these ways of keeping loyalty, people spying on each other, the Cubans in charge of security, all these different military apparatuses, it might not go that way. So the Venezuelans overwhelmingly will say, just come and knock out Maduro and everything will be fine. We're all with you. That might very well be true, whether that's legal or not, but that might very well be true. And they'd feel like Trump was their liberator, I have to say. But it might not go that way. There might be terrorism from pro-Chavista groups. There might be sabotage. There's many armed groups and barrios that are dependent on the state. Will the state be able to feed the people in the months after a regime change? Because all the food basically comes through state channels. So this is the conundrum. Some Venezuelans see the problematized side. The opposition absolutely does not. I'm just saying, I respect the opposition. They fight hard. But their whole thing for 20 years, they were not going to organize uprisings in the street that would themselves bring down the government. It's always been, wait for the Americans. They will come through external pressure to liberate us, basically.
We'll have to leave it there, but really appreciate getting your expertise on this. Thomas O'Donnell, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.